a rule in your house growing up that you thought was normal but turned out to be very strange? Story 1. When I was a kid, the rule in the car was that the driver picks the music. When I turned 16 and started driving, it became owner of the car picks the music. When I got my own car, it became most experienced driver in the car picks the music. Basically, my mom just changed the rules at random so that nobody could listen to music except her. Story 2. Don't feed friends. If friends came over after school, we weren't allowed to offer them snacks or drinks. My parents didn't want them to eat all our food. As an adult, I feed everyone. I offered food to my kids' friends. I find it so weird that my parents were so stingy. We weren't broke. Growing up, we were well off. I never minded feeding the kids who came over. Story 3. We were only allowed ginger ale if we were sick or on an airplane. It wasn't common, but we would occasionally get soda. But ginger ale was special, I guess? I was well into my 20s and had an epiphany one day that I'm a grown adult with my own money. I can just go buy a ginger ale if I want to. Story 4. Not my house, but at a friend's. I slept over at a friend's house once in elementary school, and during dinner no one was allowed to drink anything. The mom's reasoning was that by filling your stomach with water, you would be too full and cause you to not finish your meal. After everyone cleaned their plate required by the parents to not waste anything, everyone got up and went to the refrigerator to get a can of Coke. I asked for a glass to get some water and was given a rolled eye look from her mother. Story 5. You can't eat unless an adult made the food and gave you permission to eat it. Didn't get that permission often as there wasn't a present conscious adult around to ask most of the time. I mainly ate at school. We also had plenty of food at home, so it wasn't as though we were impoverished and starving. I remember one time my mom snuck up behind me and shattered a decorative bowl over my head because she caught me, half-starved, eating shredded cheese out of the bag in the middle of the night. I was 13 at the time and just hit a growth spurt. The first time I was at a friend's house and saw him just make a box of mac for us. I was panicking because he hadn't asked for or received permission to eat. He was confused, to say the least. Story 6. Every Thursday evening was fancy dinner at which there were so many more rules than dinner the rest of the week. The rest of the week the rules were just don't be messy and don't be rude. But fancy dinner meant dress nicely, no swearing, sit up straight, only talk about polite subjects, elbows off the table, etc. I was confused why we mostly had casual dinners, but my parents insisted on fancy dinners even when we didn't have company. Now as an adult, I know what they were doing. They wanted us to have upward class mobility. They were making us practice our manners so we could make a good impression on fancy people when needed. I was grateful for it when I sat down for an academic awards dinner with some of my college professors and was able to talk easily and feel good because I recognized a fancy dinner when I saw one, and like a sleeper agent who just heard my code word, I knew exactly what to do. Story 7. When I stay at my grandparents', my grandfather will not go to sleep until he knows that everybody in the house is asleep. One time I woke up to use the bathroom. Keep in mind it's 3 or 4 in the morning. As I'm walking out, he comes out of nowhere and goes, "What are you doing awake?" He got pretty mad. I never understood this, but I won't ask him why. Story 8. Not mine, but a Dine-Apache friend's. When the doorbell rings, the kids hide. My friend and her mother grew up thinking that was just a fun game. Then her mother found out that it was because her grandparents were hiding the kids that hadn't been taken to a mission school. Her grandparents told their kids that it was a game so that they wouldn't be scared. Story 9. My dad used to come into our rooms after bedtime, and if he saw that we were awake, he'd yell, "Roll over, face the wall, and go to sleep." I always wondered why facing the wall was required. I realized as an adult that if we were facing the wall, we wouldn't see the strangers coming in and out of our house at all hours of the night. Story 10. We were not allowed to lay on the bed and just read or be on the phone. Every time we did it, my father would come screaming and mocking us for being lazy or something else. When I was a teenager, I always listened for his footsteps in the hallway so I could get up quick enough and pretend to do something. Story 11. My grandma told me to not eat what they serve at birthday parties because it's rude to eat their food, and also you don't know what they put in it. Update. I asked my uncle why my grandma was like this, and his responses. She told us this because people would do witchcraft to the food to get someone sick one purpose and curse them. Story 12. My mom used to close the kitchen at 6 for me, but everyone else in the family could use it freely whenever they wanted. My brother was allowed to have snacks that I wasn't, so he could keep them in his bedroom. I wasn't allowed to eat in any room but the kitchen. Story 13. No locked doors. Ever. In fairness, it started as a safety thing when we were kids. When I was a toddler, I fell asleep behind a locked door and my parents thought I was dead because I wasn't responding. But when it carried into adulthood, it became about not letting us have boundaries or our own space. My mother assumed we were keeping horrible secrets or plotting against her if we locked a door. Heaven forbid if we just wanted an ounce of privacy. Story 14. My mom had a strict rule about me not being allowed to eat at anyone's house. She was convinced that if I accepted an invite for dinner, It would make it look like she couldn't afford to feed me. It just became my normal to say no if someone invited me to dinner. That was until I met the man who would be my ex-husband. His family kept inviting me over to dinner so that they could get to know me. I kept saying no. They thought I was rude. I finally explained why. That was when I realized that it wasn't normal. Story 15. Reading these rules makes me feel like I was in the most normal house. We didn't have any rules beyond don't touch what's not yours, referring to the sibling stuff, mainly without asking, and be respectful. That's pretty much it. We could eat whatever. We could eat at the TV or at the table as long as you tidied up after yourself. We had a no shoes in the house rule, but I mean, if you forgot something inside and ran back in with your shoes, my parents wouldn't have flipped out. I feel like so many of these rules lead to dysfunctional behavior as an adult. I don't have many rules for my kids except for talk respectfully and keep a tidy house room. Story 16. My parents always shouted at each other, and their conversations were often filled with tension. When I was in college, I had a sleepover at my best friend's house. Everything felt so peaceful, especially when we were eating together. It was then that I realized my family sucks, and I had never experienced a truly peaceful environment with them. Story 17. No electronics. While eating, especially with family, including out at restaurants, I get kind of upset when I'm eating somewhere, my partner, and they immediately take their phone out. Story 18. No red nail polish. Only whores wore red nail polish, according to my pedo stepdad. I, as an adult, wear my slutty red nail polish every time I get my nails done. Story 19. Bedroom window had to be open at all times, even in the winter. I thought it needed to be open to get air. We would suffocate if it wasn't open. Seemed totally logical. Story 20. The living room was for decorative purposes, not use the dining table, the couch, the television, the carpet, and indoor mat. My mom was really obsessed with those home magazines and the reality shows of rich, lifeless people who always seemingly had a spotless home. Also, the hand towels in the kitchen and bathroom were not for use. Additionally, if you could just overall avoid walking on the carpet, just avoid it, but the house was mainly carpet. And honestly, if you could just not talk, think, or breathe, you were good. Haha. But no. Also, Christmas toys weren't to be all opened. Only select few she allowed. The rest went into storage for collections, don't know where any of them are, TBH. Never saw them again. The girls me had to clean and cook and take care of everything, including cleaning up and serving my brother's food while they gamed. I could probably keep going, but yeah, just normal. Story 21. Not being able to make anything in the kitchen after dinner. After dinner was finished and the kitchen was cleaned, it was essentially closed. When I was younger, I had some friends over for a sleepover, and they wanted to get a snack, and I told them the kitchen was closed. So we just have to wait until morning. They all looked at me like I was insane. They convinced me to sneak a bag of chips and I was panicking the entire time. Story 22. Mom was foreign and carried weird habits with her to America. Her slogan I heard a million times: no need. Can I get fries with my burger? No need. Can we go to the movies? No need. Can I get sprinkles on my ice cream cone? No need. Anything that required spending any money was a no need. If you had to pay for oxygen to live, Mom would probably still say, no need. We weren't allowed to walk around the house barefoot or in socks because my whole family thought that's basically inviting the flu and common cold into you. If we were ever walking around the house without shoes or house slippers on, we got yelled at. Huge cultural shock when I started meeting people in college that took their shoes off at the door. Story 23. Not me, but my ex. Not allowed to eat hot dogs unless it is accompanied by a glass of orange juice, because of a belief that things in the orange juice canceled out harmful nutritional things in the hot dogs. Story 24. Being alone. It was amazing except for a few times. I woke myself up for elementary school, put myself to sleep, which, to be fair, was around 2 a.m., because my parents came back after that, which is why they couldn't wake me up. Honestly, I loved it. The times my mom stayed home being sick are the worst moments of my childhood. Being locked outside in the snow, having to go to the shed and use boxes and bags to stay warm, or being locked in the collapsing, unfinished basement without any lights. Being alone was the best. Edit. Wow. This blew up. Am a fine, well-adjusted adult. I can look back and laugh. I don't need or want therapy. I do not suffer from depression. I have no contact with my mother. Have not spoken to her in over 10 years. Story 25. No glass drinking glasses. Don't get me wrong, we had a bunch, but we weren't allowed to use them, any of us except my dad. He told me that one of us would drop one and wouldn't clean it up. Then he'd cut his foot and die. Is that what we wanted? At 24, I came home from another state, and I asked if the rule still existed. He said yes, so I took all the glasses back to North Carolina with me. Now all that said, I'm 33 and he's passed on. I was helping my mom out recently and she dropped a glass and didn't clean it up well, so maybe he had a point about our family in particular. Story 26. Bed had to be made perfectly every morning before you left for school. Sheets with proper tucked corners, comforter folded correctly over the pillows. When I was in middle school, a friend suggested that just pulling the blanket over the pillows was sufficient because technically the bed was made. I got grounded for a week for knowing better and not doing it the right way. I could only have vetted friends inside the house. Turns out not everyone leaves unsecured firearms where children can access them, and it was easier just to let me have only one friend. Assume that any weapon is loaded because they were. Not everyone keeps a rifle next to the laundry hamper in the hallway. When I was young, nap time in my room with the door shut, until I left home. In bed, promptly at bedtime. In neither case did they care whether I slept as long as I was quiet and stayed in bed. I learned to read to myself at age 3 and would often stay up half the night reading. Therapy's been great, thanks. Story 27. Kids had to stay outside unless they were doing homework. My youngest brother was 5 and he got to stay inside, but the rest of us, 8, 9, 12, 14, 16, had to be outside. This was in the 90s. Story 28. No turning the lights on before 6 p.m. Eat everything on your plate whether you like it or not. No bare feet allowed in the kitchen. Ask first before grabbing anything from the kitchen, including water. For every minute you're late after curfew, that's how many days you're grounded. 2 minutes, 2 days, etc. No one can turn on any water taps or flush any toilets while the shower is running. No getting muddy or dirty when playing outside, even accidentally, even in the spring when it's all muddy. I'm a parent now, and am healing my inner child by being the parent to my kids that I never had. Story 29. We were never allowed to use the last of the milk. If mom didn't have it for her tea coffee, things were not going to go well that day. You also knew you were getting sent to the corner store as soon as it opened. Story 30. We had school clothes and house clothes. We had to change into our house clothes as soon as we got home from school. This was to protect our clothes and make sure they lasted longer. Grew up in a pretty poor family, so makes sense. Just thought it was normal, but none of my friends had to do it. Stepdad would require us to say hi or acknowledge him anytime he walked in the room. Often met with no response or a scowl. But if we didn't do it, my mom would get an earful about how disrespectful we were. Stepdad worked third shift, and his bedroom was in the basement of our bi-level house. Had to tiptoe around when we got home from school. If we woke him up, he would come up and start yelling. My best friend lived on our street, and in the summer, I basically lived with her. She had a swimming pool, so we would be outside all the time. My stepdad would tell me I wasn't allowed to stay the night because I was going to overstay my welcome. But my best friend's parents did not mind at all and often asked me to stay. Probably because they knew my home life was so chaotic, lol. Story 31. We had to sit at the dinner table for at least half the time it took my mom to cook the meal. Bored? Make sparkling conversation. Don't like the dinner? Fine. PBJ available to you after dinner or nothing at all. Kitchen was closed. Edit for clarity. My siblings and I had to have dinner for half the length of time my mom cooked. If she spent 2 hours cooking for us, our family dinner was at least 45 to 60 minutes long for every family member older than 3. Under no circumstances was that woman standing at the stove for 2 hours just to have us eat and be done in 10 minutes. Edit 2. My mom loved to cook and did so at great lengths because she enjoyed it. 2 hours is nuts to me, but that was her norm. Story 32. My nan would get hysterical if you mentioned the name Bob, or anything to do with bobbing or fishing. Once when I was in my teens, she forbade me from dating or having a friend named Bob. Anyone named Bob who made an appearance at the house was renamed. It was weird. One day after I found an old picture of a fisherman, we were sorting out a box of old photos, and my nan grabbed it from my hands screaming about snooping people and how everyone was called Bob. I finally asked my mum about Nan's hang-up about Bob. Mum explained that Bob was my aunt's fiancé, who was also having an affair with their 13-year-old brother. Bob got drunk fishing and drowned. My uncle thought my aunt had killed him because she was jealous of him. There was no proof, but my uncle went a bit snaky and attempted, badly, no follow-through, to kill my aunt several times over the years because of Bob, and would freak out if you mentioned Bobs or fishing, but would also talk about Bobs and fishing, which was confusing. I asked my dad about the whole thing, and his theory was that Bob realized that he was engaged to my aunt and screwing my uncle. Both train wrecks as human and chose death as his only escape. This is why for many years we couldn't know Bobs. Story 33. Wasn't allowed to say someone was lying because lie was a bad word. Had to say you're telling a story. Also, shut up, be quiet, penis pokey, vagina vanya, or frick, flip, shoot, darn, fudge, dang, and bye were straight up no's. Bye was rude. Had to end calls and conversations with goodbye or I love you. As an adult now, my mother has quite the problem with me because, and I quote, those were words for adults, adult. So, is not policing how I speak or the words I use. Story 34. We were taught from a young age that it's never okay to wake dad up from a nap. We also knew not to ever hide and jump out to scare him. I didn't know until I was an adult that my dad had PTSD from his time in Vietnam and woke up violently. I just thought all dads had those rules. Story 35. Oh my gosh, I can totally relate. We had a rule that we could only eat dinner while sitting on the floor. It felt so normal at the time, but looking back, it was definitely a quirky family tradition. Story 36. Blanket hung between top of the stairs and hallway to block light. Never ever turn on hallway lights, since my mom was always sleeping. I imagine bringing friends up to your room. Story 37. You can't answer the door after washing your hair or getting up from a nap, because you will get sick. You have to have an undershirt on and your jacket zip has to be all the way closed during winter, or else you'll get a cold. You can't go swimming until your last exam is over, or else you'll get sick and have to miss an exam. Our country has a Mediterranean climate. The chances of it being too cold to handle are slim to none. My mom has this fixation that if you get a little cold or wet, you'll get sick. You cannot go trick or treat or to sleepovers. My mom thought that we would get kidnapped or raped. I get the concern, but we would ask to go in groups of very trusted friends with no big brothers or creepy dads. My friends went to sleepovers all the time. We weren't allowed to have sleepovers at ours, either because my mom didn't want to be responsible for other people's children. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends alone until the age of 15, again because my mom thought I would get kidnapped. I couldn't be braless or wear gym shorts around the house because men, well, weren't allowed to buy a school bag from one certain brand because according to my mom, their products were used in satanic rituals. We weren't allowed to go outside if it got a little windy because my mom was sure a balcony or a tree would fall on us and kill us. We weren't allowed to put anything on the coffee table or walk in front of the gas heater while it was on, because my mom was sure someone or something would catch on fire. My mom has recently revealed to me that she was diagnosed with OCD years ago, so now most of these fixations make sense. But it led me to live in a bubble. When I explain my childhood to friends, they always give me that pity look because I missed out on a lot of experiences like camping, hiking, concerts, going on vacations in other countries, abseiling, walking in the rain, etc. I'm an adult now, and while I've been trying to introduce some adventure in my life, some of the fixations that my mom had got internalized in little me's brain, so I'm still learning how to let go of that bubble. So far, I've stayed in a cabin in a forest, walked in forests even in the evenings while it was getting a bit dark, explored the mountains during winter, played with snow, and visited an abandoned village in the middle of nowhere and got there by driving through very narrow roads on the edge of the mountains. Went swimming in the cold sea, went on a road trip with my fiancé and friends, spotted a wild boar and managed to slowly get to the car park without panicking, got lost in a park with a dead phone battery with fiancé after sunset, and found our way to the train station with no light and no technology. It's nothing special, but I finally feel like I'm experiencing life. I appreciate these moments even though they're anxiety-inducing. Story 38. If you're out of bed, you wear shoes. My one parent was the rebel who went barefoot. All the rest of us got punished for being barefoot. I barely escaped Charcot-foot, and now I literally hate being barefoot. I have indoor shoes and outdoor shoes for every occasion. Story 39. There were no rules except never touch outlets or hot stoves. I found out what was okay on a case-by-case basis. Okay and not okay could change based on how either of my parents were feeling that day. What was okay with one parent might not be okay with the other. When I went to other kids' houses and to school, I found out about rules, which seemed kind of arbitrary. Eventually, I figured out that having rules helped avoid stressful conversations and yelling. When I grew up, my kids had rules, just not lots of them, and all of them explained. Story 40. We had white couches that you could only sit straight up in. My parents had no friends or joy. As an adult, I have a house full of comfy furniture, joy, and people. Story 41. On Saturday, we eat only deep-fried food. Turns out my mother told my father he was responsible for dinner every Saturday, and he only wanted to deep-fry stuff. He was the braai master of the deep fryer. Story 42. Dad was the controller of the TV at all times he was home. We only ever watched 2 channels, the others were terrible. There were only 4 channels back then. UK, 1980s. There was only one TV in the house, we watched what was on it, or did something else. Also, on Sundays, we either did only quiet activities or played outside. We weren't religious at all, it was just quiet day. Story 43. I loved to bake. Half of the cookies I baked were immediately hidden in a box of broccoli in the basement freezer. My brother would otherwise come home and eat everything I made within an hour, and leave nothing for the rest of the family. Related, I always made recipes with some having no icing or being less sweet than the rest. Pop was a type 1 diabetic, and I always wanted him to be able to have some too. Story 44. Don't sit on the pillows on the couches, they're decorative, and that will ruin them. Don't dry hands on the decorative towels in the bathroom. Only the hand towel. Don't sit on the bedspread on your bed. Looking back, it felt like my own house was more of a museum than a place to live. Story 45. We had a 5-minute phone limit, enforced by my dad. If you went over, he'd unplug the phone on you. He'd also do this to my mom. His reasoning? Phones are tools, not toys, and women speak too much. I honestly thought this was a thing, and when I was little, being the youngest, he'd make me run around and yell at my mom and sisters, 5-minute alert, 5-minute alert. The worst part was that while it was serious, he also thought it was hilarious and got joy out of unplugging the phone on us mid-conversation. Story 46. Fridays were scrounge days or fend for yourself. Gave the parents a night off cooking and assured leftovers didn't go to waste. Periodically, if there weren't any leftovers and behind on grocery shopping, we would get treated to Mexican food. Always Fridays. Story 47 had to be back home before sunset. Didn't matter when I went out, where I went. Back home before the sunset. Eat whatever is on your plate. It's all good for you. Story 48. Showered bathed with a parent as in, they were naked with you and bathed you first before they bathed themselves until the 3rd grade or so. We grew up poor, so I think this was all about pinching pennies and making the most of what we had. Story 49. We had to live with a family member for a time and her rule was the only drink you could have with dinner was milk. Gross. At my house, we had tons of ridiculous rules, but the one others are most horrified by is we were only allowed like 2 baths a week. Family of 6 and only 1 bathroom. Stepfather claimed this saved on water. He smoked so us kids always smelled disgusting. I did sports and didn't get extra baths. If us girls had our period, no extra baths either. Story 50. My brother was treated like a king and I was treated like a slave because I was born with a vagina. It was normalized by adults BC. What were we, as female children, going to do about it? Nothing but get beat and punished. I knew my mother's relationship with my brother was weird ASF, but was also normalized by boy moms. Has an absolute POS too, my brother. Good job, boy moms. The femicide rate is through the roof and males are raving psychopaths. How proud you must be. For the not my son crowd. I wasn't typing to you. Scroll your business. Story 51. The light is only allowed to be on in the room you are in. So if you go to the kitchen to get something to drink, you have to turn off the light and turn it back on when you get back. Story 52. If you don't finish what's on your plate, you have to sit at the table the entire night alone, then go to school in the morning without breakfast. Also, no TV until 5 p.m. Literally got whopped if the TV was on at 4:45 p.m. on a Saturday. Story 53. The walls must remain untouched. 2-story, 5-bedroom tuba home, and only clocks were hung on the wall. We never had art, decor, or family photos up. Now in my own home, I still have a hard time thinking about how to fill our walls. We only have clocks, a few mirrors, and our dog's puppy class certificates hung up. Story 54. My mother has always struggled with migrantes, due to that nothing in the house that made loud sounds could have the volume up. The rule was 1 level above mute if she was asleep, 2 levels above mute if she was awake. Subtitles became my best friend when watching TV and I still use them on everything. Story 55. Eat, then drink. No drinks, not even water, served with meals until after you are done eating. Seemed normal at the time, but it is totally insane. If I tried that now as an adult, I'd probably need a Heimlich. Story 56. My mother is schizophrenic and very weird. She had tons of rules like that. One weird one was that she would never seem to go to the restroom and would always hold in her pee. I asked her before I showered. We had 3 restrooms, but one was a half bath. The other functioned, but the shower leaked if she needed to go. And she would always say no to me and to just go ahead and shower. She then banged on the locked door and told me that I had to get out mid-shower because she had to go. I was told that I was to stand with shampoo in my hair, soaking wet, in the hallway, with a towel wrapped around me so that she could pee or. This actually happened several times, and she would flat out refuse to go before I showered. Her excuse was that it was too inconvenient for her to go upstairs to the 2nd bathroom. I asked her how she didn't see what she was asking me to do was inconvenient, and she just assured me it wasn't. I eventually told her to go to over it. Also, our AC broke, and it was about 90 degrees upstairs. She told me I wasn't allowed to come downstairs except to leave or eat, and I had to stay up there. I told her to go to once again. This is, of course, a small fraction of her absurd rules. Story 57. IDK how weird they were, but several felt almost like mantras, like they're kind of rhythmic in my head. If it's not yours and it's not a toy, don't touch it. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. No singing at the table was the weirdest one because my sister and I would just sing all the time and not eat. Story 58. Not a rule, but having no physical affection, no model for a healthy adult relationship, and not saying, I love you doesn't lead to a healthy sense of self-worth or confidence in adulthood. I thought this was all normal, until I actually started having friends in high school. Story 59. Be quiet when the batter is rising or it'll collapse. I firmly believe that one day a year that my mom baked oliebollen was the only day a year she got actual peace and quiet for a few hours with 4 kids at home, of which 2 are AUDHD. We really wanted oliebollen, so we tried our absolute best to be quiet. Story 60. We were not allowed to have a toaster because my stepdad thought it would burn the house down. I hid it under my bed like contraband and made toast secretly because toast is delicious. I wasn't allowed to take a shower longer than 3 minutes, or I had to finish washing with the garden hose because he would shut off the water. I have thick, long, curly hair, so that really sucked. If we didn't get up to our alarm clocks the first time, he'd spray us in bed with a water cannon. My stepdad was a... Story 61. If you fell asleep at all during the daytime, it meant you must be sick, so you weren't allowed to watch TV or go play or anything for the rest of the day. Story 62. My brother and I were never really allowed in my parents' room, except to get physical punishment. I thought it was normal. When I went to my friend's house when we were like 17, she went into her mom's room and told me to come, and I was like, no, we are going to get in trouble. She looked confused. I later found out it's just my parents, not anyone else's. Story 63. I feed my kids and their friends and even let one of the kids move in with us since his family was awful trash. He wasn't used to having clean clothes or regular meals, poor thing. He grew up to be a good man. Anyway, LOL. Anyone who comes to my house gets fed if they are hungry. Story 64. We had to listen to NPR on long drives in the car. Why? Because my mom knew that the dulcet tones would knock us all the out. Bliss. Edit yes, 20 years later, it still works. Story 65. My mom was very sick with cancer. When I was 8, 9, and 10, if my mom woke me up, it was a good day. She would make breakfast and take me to school. If the alarm clock woke me up, it was a bad day and I had to get myself ready and make my own breakfast and lunch. I told a friend this after I was grown and out on my own. My mom passed away when I was in 6th grade, and she said she had the same rules growing up. But it was because her mom was bipolar. If her mom woke her up, she was manic and made everyone food and was loud and intrusive. If she woke up to the alarm, she knew mom was down for the count, and it was her job to cook breakfast and get all her siblings ready for school, 5 total, including her. It took a lot for her to heal from this and all the other trauma her mom caused. But now she has a beautiful family with 5 kids. 3 are adopted. It's so beautiful to see how she has recovered. Story 66. I don't know if this counts as a rule, but my mom would always shout, "I'm gonna go jump in the shower." And the 3 of us kids would always shout back, "Don't jump too hard, you might get hurt." Story 67. A cousin always comes on vacation with us. For years, I thought it was because it made more sense to have even numbers. 2 people in the front seat, 2 people in the back seat, 2 people in one row on the airplane, 2 in another, 2 people in one hotel room bed, 2 in the other, 2 people in one tent, 2 people in the other, 2 people on the ski lift, 2 people in the roller coaster seat, etc. Then later I realized that my parents took my poorer cousins with us on vacation in turns, because their parents could never afford a vacation. Story 68. My grandma would always carry a shower cap with her when we would ride bikes and would cover the seats for the random people that would come around and smell bicycle seats. Story 69. Do not make any noise when eating. This means chewing, utensils hitting the plate bowl, drinking water. Yeah, apparently minimally chewing your food enough to swallow it. Woo, choking is physically bad for you. I'm 34 now and have all sorts of thyroid and tummy issues. I also learned how to essentially take very small drinks, or if I took in too much water, I know how to kind of hold it in my mouth sinus drain area so I don't make a gulping noise. My dad has crazy misogyny issues with women making noise at the table. Story 70. Not really a rule, but kind of a funny situation. My dad was diabetic. So growing up, I'd always hear dad can't have sugar, dad can't have cookies, etc. I was at a friend's house and their dad came walking out eating a cookie, and 5-year-old me goes, "Mister, neighbor man's name, you can't eat that. Dads can't have sugar." Friends, mom busted out laughing and gently explained to me that it was just my dad who couldn't have sugar. Other dads were allowed to have sugar. Story 71. No drinks before dinner. 1 piece of candy a day. 1 can of soda a day. My mom had a few select channels on TV we were actually allowed to watch. No Cartoon Network, no Nickelodeon, only certain shows on Disney and ABC. I grew up in the MTV era, when it was huge back in the early 2000s, and I missed out on so much. My husband is always like, "You never saw that?" I missed out on so many classic movies and TV shows. My parents had a lot of rules growing up, but I think this has affected me the most.